The sound of plastic tearing echoed through the backyard as Matt Johnson sliced through the liner of his above-ground pool with a utility knife. Summer was over, his kids had returned to college, and the aging pool had become more trouble than it was worth. 6 years of patching leaks and fighting algae had finally worn him down. Today was demolition day. What exactly do you think you're doing? A shrill voice sailed over the fence like a missile, hitting its target with precision. Matt sighed, not bothering to look up. He knew exactly who it was, Diana Westbrook, self-appointed queen of Oakwood Estates. In the 3 years since she'd moved next door, she reported his family to the HOA 5 times for infractions ranging from excessively vibrant holiday decorations to improper grass-length maintenance. His teenagers had nicknamed her Karen Prime. "Taking down my pool, Diana," Matt called back, continuing to cut. It seemed better days. Diana's face appeared over the fence, her highlighted bob swinging with indignation. "You can't do that without proper permits. There are rules, Matt." Matt wiped sweat from his brow. The October sun was unseasonably warm, as if fighting against the pool's demise. "It's an above-ground pool. I put it up myself, and I can take it down myself." "That's not how this works," Diana snapped. "You need demolition permits. You need to file with the HOA. You need tow." "I don't actually," Matt interrupted, something he rarely did. Confrontation wasn't his style, but after a brutal week at work and with his wife away visiting her sister, his patience had evaporated like the chlorine from his soon-to-be dismantled pool. "I checked the bylaws. Temporary structures under a certain height don't require HOA approval for removal." Diana's eyes narrowed dangerously. "We'll see about that." As Matt continued working, draining the remaining water into the designated drainage area he prepared, he heard Diana's back door slam. He shook his head and focused on the task at hand. The metal frame would be trickier than the liner, but he recruited his neighbor Eric to help with that part tomorrow. 20 minutes later, the unmistakable sound of a police cruiser's engine rumbled down the street. Matt straightened, confused, as the vehicle stopped in front of his house. 2 officers approached his open gate cautiously. "Sir," the taller one called, "we received a report of illegal demolition and possible environmentally hazardous dumping." Matt stared in disbelief. He'd actually done it. Diana had called the police on him for dismantling his own pool. From her porch across the fence, Diana stood with arms crossed, a triumphant smile playing on her lips. She gave a little finger wave when she caught Matt's eye. "Officers," Matt said, setting down his tools and walking toward them. "I think there's been a misunderstanding." What Matt didn't realize was that this confrontation would spiral into a neighborhood saga involving property rights, HOA politics, and unexpected alliances. And by the time it was over, nobody, especially Diana, would look at their quiet suburban street the same way again. Officer Ramirez pinched the bridge of his nose while his partner, Officer Chen, took notes with barely concealed annoyance. They'd been standing in Matt's backyard for 15 minutes, and Diana Westbrook had not stopped talking once. And Section 4, Paragraph 7 of the HOA bylaws clearly states that any structural modification requires written approval from the committee, Diana recited, waving a binder she produced seemingly out of thin air, which he obviously doesn't have. Officer Ramirez nodded politely. "Ma'am, as I mentioned, HOA regulations are civil matters, not criminal ones." "But the environmental dumping," Diana insisted, pointing dramatically at the shallow trench where Matt had been draining the chlorinated water. "That's a crime against nature." Matt, who had been quietly waiting for the officers to complete their assessment, finally stepped forward. "That water has been treated and sits at less than 1 part per million chlorine content. I tested it this morning." He produced a water testing kit from his workbench. "It's safer than most tap water at this point." Officer Chen walked over to inspect the drainage area. "Sir, where is this water ultimately going?" "Into my rain garden," Matt explained, pointing to the carefully designed depression filled with native plants at the edge of his property. "I installed it last year specifically to handle runoff. The plants filter the water naturally before it reaches the groundwater." Chen nodded, impressed. "That's actually quite environmentally responsible." Diana's face flushed. "Well, one other noise disturbance. My book club can hardly concentrate with all this demolition." From across the street, Mrs. Patel, an elderly woman who had lived in the neighborhood for 40 years, emerged from her house. She walked slowly toward them, leaning on her cane. "Officers," she called, "is there a problem here?" Before either officer could respond, Diana cut in. "Matt is destroying property without permits." "His own property," Mrs. Patel corrected, her voice gentle but firm. She turned to the officers. "I've been watching from my window. This young man has been working quietly and carefully. The only disturbance I've noticed is this woman shouting." Diana's mouth opened and closed like a fish out of water. That's not." "Mrs. Westbrook," Officer Ramirez said, closing his notebook, "we found no violations here. Mr. Johnson is removing his own property in a responsible manner. This appears to be an HOA matter at most, and even that seems questionable since temporary structures typically don't fall under the same regulations. Diana's nostrils flared. So you're just going to let him continue? Yes, ma'am, Officer Chen said. That's exactly what we're going to do. As the officers prepared to leave, Diana's husband, Ted, appeared at their shared fence looking embarrassed. Dee, come on, let it go. I most certainly will not, Diana declared, her voice rising an octave. This is about principles, Ted, about following rules, about property values. Matt noticed several other neighbors had emerged from their homes, watching the spectacle unfold. Some were filming with their phones. His face burned with mortification, despite being in the right. Officers, Matt said quietly, thank you for your time. I apologize that you were called out here unnecessarily. Officer Ramirez shook his head. No need to apologize, sir, he lowered his voice. Between us, this isn't the first call we've had from this block. Just keep doing things by the book, and you'll be fine. As the police departed, Diana stormed back to her house, slamming the door with enough force to rattle her own windows. Ted lingered at the fence, giving Matt an apologetic look before following his wife inside. Mrs. Patel approached Matt slowly. That woman needs a hobby that isn't harassing her neighbors, she said, shaking her head. My late husband and I put in a pool without any fuss in 1985. No one called the authorities when we took it out in 2002. Thanks for speaking up, Mrs. Patel, Matt said sincerely. The elderly woman patted his arm. This neighborhood was built on looking out for each other, not policing each other. Some people forget that. She glanced toward Diana's house. But I have a feeling this isn't over. Matt nodded, surveying his half-dismantled pool. Mrs. Patel was right. Knowing Diana, this was just the beginning. The following morning dawned crisp and clear, perfect weather for continuing the pool demolition. Matt gulped his coffee and scanned his backyard through the kitchen window. No sign of Diana yet, but the day was young. His phone buzzed with a text from Eric. Still on for 10? Bring you my reciprocating saw and a cooler of beer for after. Matt smiled and typed back a quick affirmative. At least he had allies in this bizarre neighborhood war. As he stepped outside to prepare the work area, he noticed an official-looking envelope stuck in his door. His stomach dropped. Inside was a cease and desist letter from Westbrook Legal Consulting, demanding he halt all demolition activities pending HOA review. You've got to be kidding me, Matt muttered, staring at the letterhead. Was Diana actually a lawyer? In 3 years of living next door, she'd only ever mentioned being a lifestyle consultant, whatever that meant. A quick internet search revealed that Westbrook Legal Consulting was indeed registered to Diana's husband, Ted. According to the Bare Bones website, Ted specialized in real estate and property law. Matt groaned. No wonder Diana was so confident about the bylaws. When Eric arrived, Matt showed him the letter. Eric let out a low whistle. Wow, she's really going nuclear over a pool. Is this even legitimate? Matt asked, tapping the paper. Can they force me to stop? Eric, who worked in construction management, shook his head. Not without an actual court order or injunction. This is basically just a threat. But I know a guy who knows his stuff about property law. Mind if I send him a picture? While they waited for Eric's contact to respond, they began dismantling the metal frame. Matt kept glancing nervously at Diana's house, but there was no movement. The silence was almost more unnerving than her screeching. By noon, they'd made significant progress. The aluminum frame lay in neat sections on the lawn, ready for recycling. Matt's phone rang, Eric's legal friend. Put him on speaker, Eric suggested, and Matt complied. So I looked at that letter, said the voice on the other end. It's technically on legitimate letterhead, but it has no teeth. The HOA bylaws you sent over clearly exempt temporary structures like above-ground pools from both installation and removal guidelines. Also, sending that on his own firm's letterhead when his wife is the complaining party, ethically questionable at best. Relief washed over Matt. So we can keep going. Absolutely. Document everything just in case, but you're in the clear. They thanked him and hung up. Eric clapped Matt on the shoulder. See? Nothing to worry about. The words had barely left his mouth when a black SUV pulled into Diana's driveway. 3 people in business attire emerged, clutching portfolios. Diana burst from her front door, greeting them effusively before pointing in Matt's direction. What now? Matt groaned. HOA Emergency Committee, Eric guessed, recognizing one of the members from a previous neighborhood dispute. She's pulled out the big guns. The group marched purposefully toward Matt's property, Diana leading the charge like a general heading into battle. Her face was set in grim determination, but there was a hint of smugness in her expression that made Matt's blood boil. Mr. Johnson, the Talus Committee member began, I'm Robert Chambers, HOA president. We've received an urgent complaint about unauthorized demolition on your property. With all due respect, Matt replied, trying to keep his voice steady. I've reviewed the bylaws thoroughly. Above-ground pools are classified as temporary structures and are exempt from the removal approval process. Robert cleared his throat. Ordinarily, yes. However, Mrs. Westbrook has brought to our attention that your pool has been in place for over 5 years, which according to subsection 12B of our updated bylaws, reclassifies it as a semi-permanent structure. Matt blinked. Updated bylaws? When was this update made? Last month, piped up a woman in a beige pantsuit. All homeowners were notified via email. Matt exchanged glances with Eric, who looked equally confused. I never received any email about bylaw changes. Diana's smile widened. They were sent from the new communications system. Perhaps check your spam folder? Matt pulled out his phone and checked his email, including the spam folder. Nothing. Interesting timing on that bylaw change, Eric muttered, just loud enough for the committee to hear. Almost like someone pushed it through specifically for situations like this. Robert had the grace to look slightly uncomfortable. Regardless, Mr. Johnson, we must ask you to cease demolition until you've completed the proper paperwork and received approval. And how long will that take? Matt asked. The next committee meeting is in 3 weeks, Robert replied. Applications must be submitted 10 business days in advance for consideration. Matt stared in disbelief at his half-dismantled pool. The liner was gone, the frame disassembled. The only thing left was the leveled sand base. You want me to leave my yard like this for over a month? Diana stepped forward. Rules are rules, Matt. We all have to follow them. Her tone was soothing, but her eyes glinted with victory. That's when Mrs. Patel's voice called from the sidewalk where she'd been watching the exchange. Actually, I believe I can help with this situation. She held up her tablet. I've been on the Architectural Review Committee for 15 years, and I don't recall voting on any such bylaw change. The atmosphere shifted instantly. Robert's confident stance faltered as Mrs. Patel hobbled toward them, a stern expression on her gentle face. In fact, she continued, I've been reviewing the meeting minutes from the past 6 months. There's no record of any vote on reclassifying temporary structures. She looked directly at Diana. Care to explain that, Mrs. Westbrook? Diana's face flushed in deep crimson. There must be some confusion. The vote happened during the special session in September. Mrs. Patel's eyes narrowed behind her glasses. The special session that was called with less than 24 hours' notice, but one scheduled at 2 p.m. on a Tuesday when most committee members would be at work. She tapped her tablet. Interesting that the only attendees were you, your husband, and Robert. Robert Chambers shifted uncomfortably. Now, Indira, let's not get ahead of ourselves. I'm sure there's a perfectly reasonable explanation. Yes, Mrs. Patel interrupted, her voice steel beneath silk. I believe there is. She turned to the other committee members. Diana proposed these changes 3 times in regular meetings, and they were voted down each time. So it appears she found a creative workaround. A crowd had begun to gather. Neighbors who had been discreetly watching from their porches and windows were now openly congregating on the sidewalk. Matt spotted at least a dozen people, including Ted Westbrook, who stood at the edge of the group looking increasingly mortified. The woman in the beige pantsuit, Melissa Johnson, the HOA's secretary, stepped forward. Robert, is this true? Was there a properly constituted quorum for this vote? Robert tugged at his collar. Well, technically, we had emergency powers tow. Emergency powers are for actual emergencies, Mrs. Patel said firmly, not for pushing through previously rejected proposals. She addressed the gathered neighbors. How many of you received notice about this bylaw change? Not a single hand went up. Diana's composure cracked. This is ridiculous. We're trying to maintain property values and neighborhood standards. That eyesore, she jabbed a finger toward Matt's dismantled pool, is bringing down all our home values. Actually, said a new voice, that's demonstrably false. Everyone turned to see a tall woman with a real estate portfolio tucked under her arm. It was Janelle Williams, a realtor who had sold 3 houses in the neighborhood over the past year. I was dropping off comparable market analyses to the Hendersons when I noticed the commotion, Janelle explained, and I couldn't help but overhear Mrs. Westbrook's claim about property values. Diana crossed her arms. And it's incorrect. Janelle's tone was professional but blunt. Above-ground pools like Mr. Johnson's have a negligible impact on neighboring property values, especially when well-maintained as his has been. If anything, the current trend is toward more naturalized yards with less water usage, exactly what Mr. Johnson appears to be transitioning toward. Diana's mouth opened and closed several times, no sound emerging. Melissa turned to Robert. I think we need to call an emergency meeting of the full HOA board to review these allegedly approved changes. Robert nodded glumly. That would be appropriate. Diana suddenly found her voice. This is a witch hunt. I've done nothing but try to uphold the standards we all agreed to when we move here. She whirled toward Matt. You've been undermining the HOA since day one with your your vegetable garden in the front yard, and your rain barrels and your non-standard mailbox. All of which were properly approved, Mrs. Patel pointed out, by a committee that doesn't understand the vision for this neighborhood. Diana was nearly shouting now. Ted finally approached, placing a gentle hand on his wife's shoulder. Diana, please. Let's go home and discuss this. She shook him off. No, I will not be silenced when I'm the only one trying to protect our way of life here. A teenage boy who had been filming the entire exchange on his phone snickered. Way of life is a pool, lady, not the Constitution. Several neighbors laughed, and Diana's face contorted with rage and humiliation. She jabbed a finger at Matt. This isn't over, Johnson. Not by a long shot. She stormed off toward her house, leaving Ted standing awkwardly behind. He gave Matt an apologetic look. I'm sorry about all this. I had no idea she. He trailed off, then hurried after his wife. As the crowd began to disperse, Robert approached Matt. In light of these revelations, you may continue with your project, Mr. Johnson. I'll make sure all the proper documentation reflects this decision. Matt nodded, stunned by this sudden reversal of fortune. Thank you. When only a few neighbors remained, Mrs. Patel made her way to Matt's side. I've been waiting for years for someone to stand up to that woman. She's been manipulating the system since she moved in. I wasn't trying to start a revolution, Matt said with a weak laugh. I just wanted to take down my pool. Eric clapped him on the back. Well, buddy, you did both. As they surveyed the dismantled pool and the neighbors still chatting animatedly about what had transpired, Matt felt a strange mixture of relief and unease. The battle had been won, but Diana's parting words hung in the air like a promise. This wasn't over. Not by a long shot. 2 weeks after the dramatic showdown, Matt sat on his newly installed patio furniture, admiring his transformed backyard. Where the pool had once dominated the space, there was now an elegant flagstone patio surrounded by native plants. The rain garden had been expanded, and a small fire pit occupied the center of the arrangement. It was peaceful, low maintenance, and exactly what he'd envisioned. His phone chimed with a text from his wife, Laura. Flight landed. Can't wait to see the new backyard. Love you. Matt smiled. Laura had been away during the entire neighborhood drama, and while he filled her in on the basics during their nightly calls, he knew she'd be shocked by how quickly the situation had escalated and resolved. The neighborhood had been oddly quiet since Diana's public meltdown. The Westbrooks' curtains remained drawn, and their normally immaculate lawn had grown slightly shaggy at the edges. The only sign of life had been Ted's car coming and going at regular intervals. Matt had almost convinced himself that the matter was truly settled when Mrs. Patel appeared at his gate, moving more sprightly than usual. Beautiful work, she said, gesturing to the transformed yard. Much better than that pool. Thanks, Matt replied, offering her a seat. I couldn't have done it without your help. Mrs. Patel waved away his gratitude. I've been on the HOA board since before Diana was born. I know every bylaw by heart. She settled into the chair with a sigh. But that's actually why I'm here. There's been a development. Matt felt his stomach tighten. What kind of development? The emergency board meeting I mentioned, it happened yesterday. Mrs. Patel's eyes twinkled. It was quite illuminating. It seems Diana's creative interpretation of the rules wasn't limited to your pool situation. What do you mean? She's been selectively enforcing rules for years, targeting certain neighbors while ignoring violations by her friends. She's pushed through at least 4 other emergency bylaw changes without proper notice or quorum. And Mrs. Patel leaned forward conspiratorially. She's been misappropriating HOA funds for unauthorized beautification projects that somehow always benefited her side of the neighborhood. Matt's eyebrows shot up. That's actually illegal, isn't it? Indeed. The board voted unanimously to remove her from all committees and to conduct a full audit. Mrs. Patel settled back in her chair. But here's the truly interesting part. This morning, a for sale sign appeared in the Westbrooks' front yard. They're moving. Matt couldn't hide his surprise or relief. It appears so. Ted came by earlier to apologize to me personally. He seemed lighter somehow. Mentioned something about a fresh start being long overdue. As if on cue, the sound of a car door slamming drew their attention. Diana stood in her driveway staring directly at Matt's yard, her expression unreadable from this distance. After a long moment, she turned and walked stiffly back into her house. I almost feel sorry for her, Mrs. Patel mused. Almost. Matt nodded, understanding perfectly. Diana had created her own downfall through years of manipulation and control. The pool had simply been the final straw. Later that evening, as Matt was grilling dinner to welcome Laura home, Eric and several other neighbors arrived bearing drinks and side dishes. Impromptu housewarming for the new backyard, Eric explained with a grin. Hope that's okay. Soon, the patio was filled with neighbors chatting and laughing. Some Matt had known for years, others he was meeting properly for the first time. Mrs. Patel held court by the fire pit, regaling younger residents with stories of the neighborhood's history. When Laura arrived, she was greeted like a returning hero, though she'd missed the entire saga. "I leave for 2 weeks and you start a revolution?" she whispered to Matt, squeezing his hand. "It wasn't intentional," he replied. "I just wanted to take down our pool." As the evening progressed, Matt noticed Ted Westbrook standing uncertainly at the edge of the yard. After a moment's hesitation, Matt walked over to him. "I'd wanted to apologize again," Ted said quietly, "for everything." Matt studied the man, really looked at him perhaps for the first time. Ted seemed smaller somehow, but also more present, more genuine. "It's in the past," Matt said finally. "Where will you go?" "My sister has a place near the coast." Diana's agreed to a trial separation. Ted looked simultaneously terrified and relieved. 15 years of marriage, and I never realized how much I'd lost myself until this situation. Matt nodded, unsure what to say. "Anyway," Ted continued, "I just wanted to say goodbye." The new owner seemed nice, young couple with twins. They're excited about the neighborhood. He glanced toward his house, where Diana's silhouette was visible in an upstairs window. Everyone deserves a fresh start sometimes. As Ted walked away, Laura appeared at Matt's side. "Everything okay?" Matt wrapped an arm around his wife's shoulders and surveyed the gathering in their backyard. Neighbors who had become friends all brought together because he decided to take down an aging pool. "Yeah," he said, smiling. "Everything's okay." In the soft glow of the new fire pit, surrounded by laughter and conversation, Matt realized that sometimes the best changes came from standing your ground. His backyard was transformed, yes, but so was the neighborhood, freed from the grip of someone who had confused control with community, and all because he decided it was time for that old pool to go.